It began with the flies. They gathered around the windowsill in the living room of the old farmhouse, tapping softly against the pane. Just a few at first, sleepy and black, writhing against the dim September light. Mary noticed them while unpacking boxes from the move. She was alone. Her husband, Thomas, had taken the truck into town to collect supplies, leaving her in silence with the creak of floorboards and the slow, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock that had come with the house. She swatted at the flies, annoyed, and moved on. But they didn't go away. By the time Thomas returned, there were over 24, clustered in a frantic black knot beneath the sill. "Must be something dead in the walls," he muttered, lighting a cigarette and crouching to inspect the moulding. "Old place like this? Wouldn't surprise me if a raccoon or two crawled in and gave up the ghost." Mary laughed it off. But that night, she woke to the sound of scratching. Not the delicate skitter of mice. This was deeper. Wet, like nails dragging down sheetrock, like something burrowing. Thomas heard it too, but shrugged it off. "This house is ancient," he said. "Could be pipes, could be squirrels. Hell, it could be the wind." But the flies didn't stop. By the end of the week, they were everywhere, buzzing in clouds down the upstairs hallway, clustering around the door to the basement. Always the basement, as if drawn to something behind it. Mary refused to go down there. It started around the same time. An odour, faint at first, like damp earth and iron. She assumed it was mould. The house had sat empty for 20 years, the realtor said. One family had owned it for over a century, but their last heir had vanished sometime in the 1980s. Rumour was he'd gone mad, left in the night and never came back. Thomas found a locked box buried behind a false wall in the attic. Inside were yellowed photographs, a cracked pocket watch, and a bundle of journals bound in old leather. Most were water-damaged beyond recognition, but one remained legible. He read only the first page before locking it away in his nightstand. "What did it say?" Mary asked. "Nothing important," he lied. But he stopped sleeping after that. She'd wake in the middle of the night and find him sitting at the edge of the bed, staring into the dark, breathing shallow. Sometimes she'd catch him muttering under his breath. Once she thought she heard him whisper, "It knows I'm here." It began rattling on its own, loud, sharp jolts, as though someone on the other side was pounding with both fists. But whenever they ran to it, it was still, locked, dusty, cold. They called in a pest control expert. The man refused to go into the basement, said there was something wrong with the foundation, refused to explain further, left without charging them. That night the scratching turned into voices, low, chanting. Not in any language Mary recognized, not even human, really. She couldn't make out words, only syllables, repeated over and over. Karash, Kulveth. She asked Thomas if he heard it too. He just nodded, eyes sunken and dark. The dream started next. Mary would wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. She dreamed of the house turned inside out, walls that bled, staircases that led nowhere, and Thomas standing in the basement doorway, arms outstretched, whispering her name backwards. "Yuram! Yuram! Yuram!" She stopped sleeping. She took to pacing the halls at night with a flashlight, but the batteries always died faster than they should. The clocks no longer worked. They'd stop at 3:17 a.m. and never resume until morning. Thomas no longer spoke. He sat in the kitchen each night, staring at the basement door, whispering into his hands. One night, she woke up to find the bed soaked with blood. Not hers, not Thomas's, no wounds, no explanation. Just warm, metallic blood, soaking the sheets and dripping onto the wooden floor. They burned the bedding. Mary begged him to leave. He wouldn't. "She's almost done waking up," he said. "She?" Mary broke into his nightstand when he was in town. The journal smelled like old wood and rot. The writing inside wasn't Thomas's, it was someone else's. Shaky, feverish. The last entries were nearly illegible, but she could piece together fragments. The thing in the walls was always here. Grandfather fed it rabbits, father fed it birds, I fed it rats. But she's hungry now. Too hungry. It waits behind the bricks, scratching, thinking. She doesn't sleep anymore. She wants out. She wants a name. I think I gave it mine. I think it's wearing my skin now. Mary slammed the book shut and ran. She packed a suitcase, called a taxi, planned to leave before Thomas returned. But the basement door was open. She stood at the top of the stairs, suitcase in one hand, flashlight in the other. The stench hit her like a wave. Mold, rotting meat, something far worse beneath it all. Like rusted blood soaked into the bones of the earth. The basement was deeper than it should have been. The stairs descended at impossible angles. The walls pulsed faintly, like lungs breathing. Something wet dripped in the dark. She didn't want to go down, but she heard a voice, Thomas's, calling for help. It didn't sound like him, but it used his voice. She descended, the descent. The staircase went down farther than any basement should. Steps became stone, then earth. Then something like flesh. The air was thick. Breathing was like inhaling smoke and syrup. The walls were pulsing, groaning, breathing. Whispers followed her, distant, male and female, hundreds of voices in unison murmuring from inside the earth. Karak, Kulvath, she waits. She found Thomas at the bottom, or what was left of him. He was standing perfectly still, facing a wall of black stone carved with symbols that seemed to move when you didn't look directly at them. His skin was translucent, veins throbbing with dark fluid. His mouth was open far too wide. A sound came out, a low hum, like a beehive inside a throat. Mary screamed. He didn't move. The wall cracked, a hand pushed through, not a hand, a limb, a tendril. Fingers longer than arms, nails like obsidian blades. She turned and ran, back up the stairs, up the impossible incline, but they kept shifting behind her, lengthening, pulsing. The door to the basement was gone. She woke up in bed. Sunlight filled the room. The birds chirped outside. Thomas was beside her, smiling, normal. Bad dream, he asked. She nodded, smiled weakly. Maybe it was just stress. Maybe it was exhaustion. But something was wrong with his smile. It didn't reach his eyes. And later that day, when he turned his back, she saw the skin behind his ears ripple like something was moving beneath it. That night, she heard him whispering to the basement again. And this time, the voice answered back. Over the next week, the house changed. Subtle at first, mirrors no longer reflected properly. Her reflection would blink out of sync. The faucet water turned black for a moment, then clear again. The TV would turn on by itself, displaying nothing but static and a low growling hum. Then the rooms began to rearrange. The kitchen would be where the dining room was. Doors opened into solid walls one day, then back to rooms the next. The attic disappeared entirely. The air grew thick. Time stretched. Sometimes she'd blink and hours would pass. Thomas no longer slept. He just stood outside the basement door, waiting, smiling. She read the final entry in the journal again. This time something new had appeared at the bottom. She has my name. She is my name. She needs a body. She takes her home. Mary finally understood. It wasn't just the house that was haunted. The house was the haunting, a living thing, fed by memory, by identity, by names. And Thomas was already gone. His skin, his voice, just a vessel now, a shell for whatever she was. On the 33rd night, Mary opened the basement door herself. She descended the stairs with a candle in one hand and the journal in the other. This time, the stone wall was waiting for her. Open, pulsing. She stepped through, and the door slammed shut behind her. The house was sold again in the spring. A new couple moved in. Newlyweds, smiling, optimistic. They didn't ask about the last owners. They didn't ask why the basement door was boarded up from the inside. On their third night, the wife woke to find flies gathering on the windowsill, and from the basement came a voice. Yiram, Yiram, Yiram. The ice never melted in Borealis Station. Perched at the edge of the Arctic Circle, the research outpost had been abandoned by most of the world. A steel and glass skeleton surrounded by miles of frozen rock and long shadows, the facility stood as the last whisper of a failed climate monitoring initiative. Now it housed only 5 people, all of them ghosts in their own way. Dr. Elena Vyatkina, head meteorologist, had stopped believing in coincidence. The storm that forced them to stay past their original evacuation date was now in its 3rd week. It hadn't moved. Not even a single degree of wind direction. Just endless white screaming against the observation windows. Inside, the team had taken to silence. They were Elena, Marcus, the systems tech, Ravi, the geologist, Lillian, the linguist, and Harper, the military liaison who insisted he wasn't military. The kind of man who could take apart a rifle blindfolded but claimed to be just a contractor. There was no sun anymore, only a muted violet haze through the clouds. The sky never turned black and it never turned blue. Time meant nothing, and then the signal came. It started as static, A repeating burst of patterned white noise received on Lillian's unused equipment, an old spectrum analyzer meant for measuring atmospheric anomalies. It beeped in time with nothing. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "Maybe interference," she said. "Or maybe it's not." The others gathered. The noise continued. Louder, sharper. It scratched at the edge of hearing like nails beneath a frozen lake. Ravi was the first to say what no one wanted to hear. "It's a language." They ran a spectral decomposition. The patterns repeated every 7 seconds. Lillian fed the data into a phonetic translator. Nothing matched. No known language, no encryption signature, no meteorological phenomena. But the tones, they sounded like words. Late that night, Lillian couldn't sleep. She kept hearing the beeping in her dreams, until the dreams weren't dreams. She woke on the floor of the observatory, barefoot, the glass fogged from her breath. Her notebook was in her hand, filled with symbols she didn't recognize. Dozens of them, all in her handwriting. The last page read, "It's awake now." Ravi, growing more obsessed, had drilled deeper than protocol allowed. "It's not permafrost," he whispered one morning. "It's organic. There's texture, like skin." Marcus lost radio contact with the Norwegian weather satellite. Harper's security cameras began blinking out one by one, and Elena dreamed of eyes. Always the same, hundreds of eyes, frozen open in the ice, watching from below, blinking once every 7 seconds. Then Ravi vanished. They found his boots by the eastern snow gate. No tracks leading away, no note, no explanation, only a single phrase written into the snow in his handwriting, "It wants a voice." The day Ravi disappeared, the storm stopped. For the first time in 23 days, the sky broke open. Not with sunlight, but with blackness, pure night. Stars sharp as razors. A deep silence fell. Lillian stood outside for nearly an hour. "I heard him," she said later, "underneath me, screaming through the ice." They began to lose time. Harper claimed the clocks were tampered with. Marcus insisted the servers hadn't updated in days. Elena woke up once and found her calendar app looping February 13th. It had been looping for 3 days. "We're slipping," Marcus muttered, "like the world's cracked beneath us." Lillian kept drawing the symbols. She couldn't stop. One of them appeared on the hallway wall, drawn in blood. They stopped sleeping. Food tasted sour. The water turned cloudy. The ice samples Ravi collected began to melt. Despite the ambient temp being minus 40 degrees, the meltwater was red. Marcus found something buried in Ravi's logs, a tunnel, he claimed, unmapped, reaching beneath the eastern plateau. They argued, but eventually followed it. They descended in silence. The tunnel was smooth, artificial. No signs of drilling or chisel. The walls glistened. At the bottom, a chamber, round, black, and in the center, something that pulsed. It looked like a heart. The size of a truck, wrapped in roots, breathing, carved into the ice all around it with the same symbols, perfectly etched. Harper drew his gun, and the chamber spoke. Not in words, not in sound, but into their heads. Thoughts like knives. Lillian dropped to her knees. "It's remembering us," she whispered. "It doesn't know who it is. It's dreaming." And we woke it up. They ran. The tunnel behind them howled. Back in the station, Lillian went into a trance, scribbled symbols across the floor in ash, burned her notebooks, slept beneath the stars, muttering names no one had taught her. Elena confronted the others. "We have to go." But the storm had returned, worse than ever. And Ravi was back. He stood at the edge of the snow fence, naked, covered in frost, eyes gone white. They brought him inside, sat him by the fire. He didn't speak, didn't blink. That night, Marcus hanged himself in the communications tower. He left behind one recording. 11 seconds long. Just him, weeping. At the end, his voice changes. "Open it. Let it out." Harper locked the entrance to the tunnel, rigged it with charges. "It wants our minds," he said. "That's how it spreads. We're broadcasting it now. We are the signal." Lillian tried to eat the pages of her last book. Ravi whispered to the walls. Elena began bleeding from her ears. Her teeth fell out in clumps. She dreamed of birth, massive cosmic birth, stars born screaming, flesh breaking through ice. Then the dreams became waking. She found herself in the tunnel again, alone, standing in front of the heart. It pulsed once, and she knew her name was not Elena. It never had been. Lillian slit her throat with a scalpel. Ravi vanished again. Harper detonated the tunnel. It didn't work. The crater stayed open, and from it came the signal. Louder than ever. So loud it cracked the windows, and something climbed out. It wasn't a creature. It wasn't a god. It was memory. ancient memory, cold and endless and starving. Elena faced it alone, and she remembered, not this life, not this station, but before Earth, before time. And it remembered her. "Welcome back," it said. "The station is gone now, swallowed by ice. The signal still pulses, 7 seconds, always. Some say the Borealis flare was an anomaly. Some say it was a geothermal collapse. Others say nothing at all. But if you listen at night when the wind is still and the sky turns violet, you might hear it. A voice beneath the cold earth, calling you home." The town of Delwood hadn't changed in 20 years. Same cracked pavement on Main Street, same leaning lamppost outside the church, same dead-eyed houses sagging under the weight of forgotten seasons. Thomas Ellery hadn't planned on coming back. He'd left at 18 with a suitcase, a college scholarship, and a promise to himself that he'd never return. But when his mother passed and left him the old house at the edge of Black Birch Woods, there wasn't much choice. A week off work. Enough time to sort the paperwork, clean out the dust, and sign whatever forms needed signing. He didn't plan on staying the night, until the storm hit. It looked just like he remembered. Pale blue paint now faded to grey, shingles curling like leaves ready to fall, the porch sagging like a tired breath. The key still fit. Inside smelled of old wood and mothballs, plastic-covered furniture, family photos gone sun-bleached and water-damaged. The house felt like a paused memory. His mother's bedroom was untouched, a single book still splayed open on the nightstand, a collection of handwritten notes about dreams, or something like dreams. The pages were filled with increasingly erratic handwriting. "It's hiding again. It only moves when I sleep. I blocked the crawl space, but it watches through the vents." Crawl space? He didn't remember any crawl space. Later that night, the power went out. The storm outside howled against the windows, rattling them in their frames. Thomas lit a candle and wandered the dark halls of his childhood, unfamiliar shadows stretching across familiar walls. That's when he heard it. A soft knock from beneath the floor. 3 taps, a pause, then again. He froze. Tried to convince himself it was the house settling. Pipes, maybe, but the pattern was deliberate, rhythmic. He pulled back the rug in the hallway. The floorboards beneath looked newer than the rest, mismatched and recently nailed down. He fetched a crowbar. Underneath the boards was a narrow opening, a hatch leading into darkness. He held the candle down, peering into the crawl space. Dirt, wooden support beams, scratched walls, and something else, a faded blanket, a cracked porcelain doll, a small shoe. Someone had been living down there, or hiding. The air was cold and stale. It smelled of mildew and something else, something sour, feral. Then came the whisper. Right behind his ear, "You took too long." He whirled around. No one was there. He slept in his old bedroom that night, door locked, candle burning. In the morning, there was writing on the mirror, words scrawled in condensation, "Don't leave the lights off." The storm had knocked out the power for the whole street. He searched the attic for flashlights and found one, batteries corroded. A half-burnt candle remained his only defense. Later, he checked the crawl space again. The doll was gone. So was the blanket. Only a small drawing remained, scratched into the dirt, a stick figure inside a box, surrounded by eyes. That night, he heard breathing from the vents. He hadn't thought about the hiding place in years. Back when he was 6 or 7, he used to play a game. His mother called it imaginary, but it felt real at the time. He'd hide under his bed for hours, whispering to someone he called the Listening Man. He didn't remember inventing the name. It just came to him. Sometimes he'd leave gifts for it. Buttons, marbles, a tooth. In exchange, the Listening Man kept the bad dreams away. But then one night, Thomas had locked the bedroom door and ignored the whispers. After that, the dreams came back, and the game stopped. Until now. Each night grew stranger. Footsteps in the attic, the smell of dirt in the living room, scratches on the inside of the closet door, and the drawings kept appearing. Crude, childlike sketches on the walls, the mirrors, even on the windows in condensation. They always showed a shape in the house, always one room closer to his bedroom. On the 5th night, he awoke to find the flashlight gone. Only the candle remained. The flame flickered unnaturally, not from wind, but from breath. Something invisible exhaled beside him, and in the candlelight, he saw shadows that didn't match his movements. In the basement, he found a shoebox labelled "Do Not Watch." Inside were 8 VHS tapes, all unmarked except for numbers 1 through 8. He watched them on the old TV in the study. The first showed his childhood room, the camera hidden in the corner. Thomas, about 7, speaking to someone off-screen, whispering, nodding, holding up a drawing. The second showed him placing something under his bed, a small wooden box. The third, he's older, silent, crying in the corner, the closet door rattling behind him. Tape 5, the room is empty, but the bed shifts, something large underneath. Tape 8 was static, but right before it ended, one frame of Thomas's adult face, sleeping. The entries in his mother's journal became erratic near the end. She wrote of a thing she'd once sealed away, a creature made from dream logic and forgotten thoughts, a parasite that lived in the crawl space of the mind. She called it the Hollow One. It only exists when you stop believing it doesn't. You must play its game. Never turn your back to the vents. Thomas began hallucinating, or dreaming maybe. Impossible staircases, endless halls, rooms folding into themselves. One night he found himself inside the crawl space, unable to remember how he got there. A voice whispered, "You left me." Now he boarded up the vents. He nailed shut the closet door. He slept with a candle in hand, eyes fixed on the mirror. But still the air turned heavy. Still the breathing crept in. And still the voice inside his mind whispered lullabies in a language he didn't understand. In the morning he found writing carved into his chest. "Now you hide." That night the candle went out, and in the pitch black a hand found his. Small, cold, familiar. A child's voice whispered, "Tag, you're it." Thomas was never seen again. The house now sits empty, listed for sale every few years, never finding a buyer. Locals avoid it. Children dare each other to knock on the door, but no one stays long. Sometimes at night you can see a flicker of candlelight through the upstairs window. And if you stand close to the floorboards outside, you can still hear breathing. Blackwood Manor, October 12, 1987. Eleanor Blackwood's hands trembled as she dipped her pen into the inkwell. The candlelight flickered, casting long, grasping shadows across the parchment. Outside, the wind howled like a dying beast, rattling the windows of the ancient estate. She wrote in hurried, desperate strokes, "My dearest Jonathan, if you are reading this, then I am already gone. The house has taken me, just as it took father and grandmother before him. The whispers, they never stop. They crawl inside your mind, filling it with their poison. At first I thought I was imagining them, just the wind, the old wood settling. But now I hear them clearly. They speak in voices not their own. Do not come for me. Burn this place to the ground. Let the earth reclaim it. With my last love, Eleanor." She folded the letter, sealing it with wax, and placed it inside the drawer of her writing desk. As she stood, the floorboards creaked behind her. A cold breath brushed against her neck. Eleanor closed her eyes. She knew what came next. Daniel Carter had never expected to inherit a mansion. The lawyer's letter had arrived on a Tuesday, typed in crisp, formal language. "Dear Mr. Carter, as the last living relative of Eleanor Blackwood, you are hereby named the sole heir to Blackwood Manor, located at 47 Blackwood Lane, Hollow's End. The estate has been unoccupied for 30 years. You may claim it at your discretion." Daniel frowned. He had never heard of Eleanor Blackwood. His mother's side of the family had always been tight-lipped about their past. Curiosity got the better of him. 1 week later, he stood at the iron gates of Blackwood Manor, the towering structure looming before him like a forgotten nightmare. The house was a grotesque masterpiece of Gothic architecture, twisted spires, broken stained glass windows, and ivy strangling the walls like skeletal fingers. A gust of wind carried the scent of damp earth and something else. Something rotting. Daniel swallowed hard. What the hell have I gotten myself into? The inside of the house was worse. Dust coated every surface, swirling in the dim light filtering through the grimy windows. The air was thick with the stench of mildew and decay. Daniel dropped his duffel bag on the floor, the sound echoing through the hollow halls. "Guess I'm home," he muttered. He spent the afternoon exploring. The house was a maze of corridors, each one darker than the last. Portraits of long-dead Blackwoods lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow him as he passed. As night fell, Daniel set up a makeshift bed in the study. He lit a fire in the hearth, the flames casting flickering shadows across the walls. That's when he heard it, a whisper. Daniel! His blood turned to ice. The voice had come from inside the room. Sleep was impossible. Every time Daniel closed his eyes, the whispers returned. Soft at first, then growing louder, more insistent. You shouldn't be here. She's waiting for you. In the basement. Daniel sat up, sweat dripping down his back. Who's there? He demanded. Silence. Then, thump! Something heavy had just moved upstairs. Morning brought no relief. Daniel spent the day researching the house's history at the local library. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Hargrove, paled when he mentioned Blackwood Manor. That house is cursed, she whispered. The Blackwoods were a troubled family. They dabbled in things they shouldn't have. Dark things. What kind of things? Daniel pressed. Mrs. Hargrove leaned in. They say Eleanor Blackwood made a pact with something that lived beneath the house. Something that hungers. That night, Daniel stood before the basement door. The wood was warped, the lock rusted shut, but the whispers were coming from behind it. With a deep breath, he forced the door open. A rush of frigid air hit him. And then, a child's laughter echoed from the darkness below. The basement was a tomb. Old furniture lay covered in sheets, cobwebs draping every surface. But at the far end of the room, something gleamed in the dim light, a symbol carved into the stone floor. Daniel recognized it from his research. A summoning circle. Oh God! A cold hand gripped his shoulder. He turned. A woman stood before him, pale, her eyes hollow, her mouth sewn shut with black thread. Eleanor Blackwood. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. And then the shadows moved. 6 months later, a realtor stood outside Blackwood Manor, a bright smile on her face. It's a beautiful property, she told the young couple. A real fixer-upper. As they stepped inside, the wind carried a whisper through the halls. Welcome home.